Recently, I've been seeing a lot of very fascinating articles in scientific journals explaining that scientists have been able to demonstrably prove that space is a byproduct of time. It was about 2.5 years ago that I put out a video on this channel titled Time Creates Space, because it is in fact a basic Vedantic concept. This is not to belittle the current scientific progress at all. In fact, that's exactly what science is for. It's for verification of hypothesis. So these scientists do deserve all the congratulations in the world, and it is in fact astounding. In this video, I want to explore the concept in more detail because Vedanta gives a lot more detail than just saying that space comes from time. So first, let's handle the very valid question from your standard 4-year-old human being. If X comes from Y, then what does Y come from? Time creates space. Well, what creates time? Vedanta gives an answer for this. And it gives that answer in such a way that you don't get an infinite regress. You don't have to settle with this impossible logical loop of a chicken and egg situation. According to Vedanta, consciousness creates time. Now, I will explain how it creates time, but first let me explain why it solves the infinite regress problem, the chicken and the egg problem. Consciousness is not a thing which is produced by anything else, because the nature of consciousness itself is to be the basis of everything else. To explain this more clearly, ask yourself what reality is. Reality is real things. What are real things? Real things are things that you can hear, see, touch, smell, feel, or think. So in other words, reality is something which you can experience. The experiencer is not a part of the experienced, but is what gives meaning and reality to the experienced. In other words, consciousness, the experiencer, is the basis for reality, the thing which is experienced, and therefore it is its own basis. Anadir adir, sarva karana karanam. If you don't quite understand that, because maybe I didn't really explain it perfectly, just ask in the comments, and I'll try to see it, notice it, and reply. Now, let's discuss how consciousness creates time, and then how time creates space. Consciousness, as we said, is the experiencer. The experiencer has an inherent motive. It's not something external to consciousness that consciousness picked up, or it's not something deleterious to consciousness. It's just an integral dharma or aspect of what consciousness is. What is the motivation that is intrinsic to consciousness? What is the intrinsic motivator of the experiencer? It's the motivation to experience. It's really simple. This motive is the kama, or the karma, which is inherent naturally in Brahman consciousness. Sa kamyata bahusya prajayata. It is this motivator to experience which is the actual root form of time itself. The experiencer wants an experience. An experience is an event. Therefore, the consciousness has within itself the capacity to produce an event. An experiencer requires an event. An event is something which happens. That requires time. So consciousness has intrinsic to it time. And it manifests time in its quest to have experiences. There's a third dharma to Brahman, or consciousness. There's the capacity to experience things, chit. There's the drive to experience the joy or pleasure of experiencing things, the motivator, the ananda. And then there is the capacity to produce something that can be experienced. That is the sat. So this is why Brahman is described as Sat Chit Ananda. Time interacts with the Sat aspect, which is known as Prakriti. And that interaction generates various evolutes previous to time creating space. So what Vedanta is actually offering science here is the opinion that there may be steps in between time and space. According to Vedanta, the first thing that time causes by interacting with Prakriti, the first thing that the experiencer generates by following its motive to experience something, is chitta. Chitta is this capacity to process the experiences so that they're not just vague, undifferentiated experiences, but they're specific, variegated experiences with details to them. The chitta then develops three parts, or three functions. First is the asmita or ahamkar, which is the capacity for the experiencer to locate itself in some relationship to the experienced. In other words, asmita or ahankar allows the experiencer to become a part of the experience. So that's the first aspect of chitta. It then produces buddhi, which is the actual processor of the data of the experiencer, the thing that sorts it out into specific parts that have some meaning. We call it intellect. And the third part is the overarching part called manas. And the manas is the thing that will experience reactions, which we call emotions, and then will develop desires for those emotions. So this will amplify and variegate, prismatize the inherent kama or karma of Brahman, of the experiencer. So with these three components, the experiencer has the full capacity to experience very specific things. The space is simply a tangible, highly specific, and highly exact way of representing or expressing the mind's desires. Space is a capsule in which four other physical constituents can combine to produce all kinds of different tangible objects. Those tangible objects act as emotional triggers. And those emotional triggers is what the experiencer enjoys. So Brahman, the consciousness, through its agency of time, creates an evolution of events which generates mind, and then that mind generates specific objects to invest its desires in. That's how it generates space. This whole science is fully developed in the Indian darshan called Sankhya, which is the original form of empirical science. It is very, very lucidly and concisely explained in the Puranas, especially the Bhagavad Purana. The Bhagavad Purana, which has 12 parts, particularly deals with Sankhya in the third part, and introductorily also in the second part. So I have translated the second and third parts of the Bhagavad Purana into English, and those are available through my website. You can go to victicare.com and go to books, and then look for those. There's the Bhagavatam Canto 2 or Part 2 and the Bhagavatam Part 3. Thanks so much for watching.